games. We love playing them, we love making them, we love talking about them. But what makes a good video game? No one really knows, or better said, it's different for everyone playing. But I do believe that when you look at gaming as a whole, at gaming as a culture, there are some titles that are doing something that in some way left a huge coffee stain on the map that is gaming. So that whenever you look at the map, you can't help but notice it. And in this video, I want to point out 5 of those games and talk about what I think makes them so important. Just a quick reminder, while I will try to avoid spoilers, since we are talking about video games that are out for quite a while, there might be one or the other. So just be aware of that. And if you think that there are any games that are missing on my list, just leave a comment below and tell me which ones they are. And if you're already there, you can click the like button and subscribe to my channel if you want to stay up to date with any future videos that I make. With that being said, let's get into the video. Have you ever heard the term AAA games? It's a commonly used moniker borrowed from finance for games that have a very big budget for both production and marketing. And people therefore often have very high expectations for those games. And the first game that apparently used this term in their promotion was Squaresoft's Final Fantasy VII. Final Fantasy VII is up until today one of the, if not the best known game of the Final Fantasy series. If you look at Google Trends, you will see that over the years it was always searched a lot, compared to the other entries maybe except for Final Fantasy X. And for a good reason, because the game did many things right. It has interesting characters, a very emotional and touching story with one of the biggest twists in gaming history, something very uncommon at the time. It has absolutely satisfying gameplay and very good music. The reason it was so expensive that it became a AAA game was that they used actual video in the game. Let me explain. Before Final Fantasy VII, the most common way to do cutscenes was by using in-game sequences. But Final Fantasy started rendering their cutscenes beforehand, putting them into the game to be played at certain moments, which allowed for very impressive graphics, at least for the time. However, this made the games also very big, and Square had to abandon their old friends from Nintendo and switch to Sony, since the PlayStation and its disk drive was able to use CD-ROMs, which let them handle the big size of their game more easily. You still got 4 discs when you bought the game, which you had to switch at certain points. Nowadays, using pre-rendered video in games is actually quite common, since storage space is not such a big deal anymore. But Final Fantasy VII was the game that pioneered this. I'm a big fan of Final Fantasy since I like the storytelling that they do quite a lot, and personally I also still like Part 7 the most. I think it's the strongest narratively, but that's just a matter of taste. Chances are you have played Pokemon or some of its variants at some point in your life. The game is so huge that some people on YouTube argue that if we die out and aliens find our desolate planet, they would find so much Pokemon stuff that they would probably think that those little creatures were our gods. But the game mechanic that Pokemon is most well known for actually comes from another game that was also all about capturing monsters. Megami Tensei. Megami Tensei is a very old JRPG, a Japanese role-playing game. Similar to more popular entries in that genre like Final Fantasy or Dragon Quest. Like many games with a lot of narrative from that time, the game is quite text-heavy. But I would actually say that is a good thing, since this is what made the monster catching in particular very interesting, because in order to capture them, you have to start negotiations with the monster, or the demons as they call it in the Mega 10 series. This system was totally unheard of at the time, and many other great games like the aforementioned Pokemon, or also games like Undertale, say that they have been inspired by Megami Tensei or some of its predecessors. The series itself is quite big. There are more than 20 games if you count all the spin-offs and sequels and prequels and everything. And while the game certainly has its weaknesses, be it due to technical limitations or just developers not having figured certain things out yet, I think Megami Tensei has actually aged quite well, especially if you like narrative games and RPGs. It's a nice little trip down nostalgia lane if you're up for it. And there are still way more Mega 10 fans out there than you might think. The effect this game has on gaming culture is insane. Monster capturing has become a very popular trope in gaming. Even in many other games that have nothing to do with RPGs, you are able to collect some kind of creature in one way or the other. And while yes, Pokemon might have popularized this, it all started with Megami Tensei. I have a whole different video where I talk about Megami Tensei, especially in terms of the whole Pokemon Palworld controversy. If you want to check that out, I will leave a link in the description. Horror is a very oversaturated genre. There is more horror games out there than I care to count. And there's a good reason for it. Horror or thrill is something that a lot of people enjoy. But a game like that somehow loses its effect after you've played it once. There is often not that much of a replay value to it, if everything just depends on jump scares. You play the game once and then you need another one. You need a new fix. There are exceptions to this, of course, and one of the most important ones for me would be Silent Hill 2. Now, the first Silent Hill was also not a bad game, but Silent Hill 2 had a way stronger focus on characters instead of the plot. It's very character-driven, which worked out really well for them. Many things that happen in design or gameplay are actually metaphors or references to James Sunderland, who is the main protagonist of Silent Hill 2. It's the first game that I have seen that gets critical acclaim, not just from players, but from artists, filmmakers, and all kinds of non-gaming critics alike, praising the use of symbolism, atmosphere, and psychology, and comparing it to works by David Lynch or Francis Bacon. While there are enemies in this game, the focus is often not on killing them. They are obstacles, yes, and they are there to make your progress harder, but your progress doesn't depend on killing them. The main part of the game is navigation. You navigate through the fog-covered town of Silent Hill, trying to find routes around obstacles, collecting maps and keys, and solving little puzzles. It's actually not super complex. The game lives from its mood, from the experience and how it tries to communicate it to the players through more than just simple gameplay. I think Silent Hill is a good reminder that games are a multifaceted medium. And while gameplay is one aspect of it, others are just as important and can sometimes be the reason your game gets from good to great. I never owned a Sega Dreamcast, but one of my cousins did, and I remember his favorite game was Shenmue. And as I grew older and looked into video games in more of an academic way, I realized that this game was actually way ahead of its time. Shenmue is an action-adventure game created by Yu Suzuki and developed and published by Sega for their Dreamcast system. It's actually a whole series of games. Up until now there are 3 mainline games out, all of them revolving around the story of the main character, Ryo Hazuki, a teenage martial artist on a quest to find his father's killer in 1980s Japan and China. And while the story is not bad, it is not necessarily what Shenmue is known for. It's rather a bunch of features that were used in the game that were quite new at the time but are rather ubiquitous now. The games have open world settings with a mix of brawler battles and quick time events. They also include some aspects of role-playing games, life simulation and social simulation, like day and night cycles, variable weather, NPCs with daily schedules, and interactive elements like vending machines and arcades. Shenmue was basically the game that introduced quick time events, and to some level also open world exploration, which we will see built upon in later games like Grand Theft Auto, the Yakuza series or Fallout 3. Shenmue 1 and 2 were praised for their unprecedented level of detail, especially when it comes to things to do outside the main questline. In these games, the shops open and close, buses follow schedules, and characters have routines, synchronized with the in-game clock. Your main character gets a daily allowance, which he can spend on items like food, lottery tickets, audio cassettes, capsule toys, whatever you can find. At the time it was released, the original Shenmue was the most expensive video game ever developed. And while its focus on sometimes mundane details did divide the player base a little bit, it generally received very good reviews. However, despite its critical acclaim, the games were commercial failures, leading to challenges in developing further installments. Shenmue 3, which came out after Suzuki departed from Sega, was not received very well, with many players being disappointed that the game doesn't feature anything new and feels very old-fashioned. Nevertheless, the franchise still has a lot of fans and is well remembered in gaming culture. At times, I am not really sure if I should call Minecraft a game, because technically it is more like a sandbox. Yeah, you have the dragon, so there is some kind of goal to it, but also not really. You never really get told that this is what you should do. I think I've played the game for months before I even found out that there is some kind of final boss. As a matter of fact, Minecraft never really tells you what you're supposed to do. It just drops you into a procedurally generated world made out of blocks that you can interact with, which actually ends up being quite addicting, because more often than not you quickly create your own goals with all the obstacles that come with that. You want to survive the night, you have to figure out how to get away from the zombies. Dig a hole, make a house, then you want to make the house nicer, so you have to get wood, so you have to get tools. You know what I'm getting at. There are tons of survival games out now that work in a similar way, but most of them are a little bit more scripted. And I think this is why Minecraft to this day is still insanely popular. It really lets you do whatever you want. It's like the digital version of Lego bricks, and just as widespread. People use it for a variety of things. There are even people who make electrical circuits or logic circuits or even whole computers within Minecraft. If there is one game that you find used in schools, it is most likely Minecraft, because it can actually be used to visualize a lot of things really efficiently. And apart from all of that, it's actually not very complex. Most of the mechanics you can get and understand very easily. I don't really think that there is anything out there that is really comparable to Minecraft, which is the reason why sometimes I don't really want to call it a game. However, Minecraft is definitely marketed among games and among gamers, and is very popular in that scene in general. And needless to say, it has a huge influence on many other video games, so it definitely deserves a place on this list. That's it for today. I hope you liked the video. If you did, please click the like button and subscribe to my channel if you want to stay up to date with any new videos that I make. You can also follow me on Threads or write me a comment here on YouTube. But other than that, I hope you have a good day and see you in the next video. Bye bye.